Welcome. My name is Lawrence Saint-Onge. I'm the chair of SMPTE Toronto. I would like to welcome everybody in-house and in virtual at the same time for the SMPTE NAB 2024 wrap-up meeting. So our sponsor for tonight is Applied Electronics for the evening, and yeah, that's my list. AWS for the room. So the meeting is arranged by Stash Bax and Tony Mareker, except Stash couldn't be with us tonight. He's been called on another in New York. That's what I heard. So our evening protocol, each presenter will share their NAB 2024 experiences. Question will be during the panel discussion. In-house question, please use the microphone provided. We have 2 of these, maybe 2 more. Chime virtual quests, please use the chat box. No breaks between the presentation. And, well, Stash was called to New York for the meeting. So tonight's presentation is from Paul Stichley from Applied Electronic, Tony Mareker from Mir Tech Systems, Christian Scalato, Tony Metropolitan University, Steph Gagnon, Media Pro, NHL Network, MLB Network, ESPN Toronto Blue Jays, François Legrand, ingénieur, Senior Director Engineering, Governance and Engineering at CBC Radio-Canada, Noor Amazon Web Service, and Brian Samir. So, without any ado, welcome, Paul.
I got to get a new picture without the sugar-eating grin on it. A clicker. So I'm going to give an overview of the show itself versus talking about any technology. Some of the things I'll touch on technology, and you can, the bio, everybody knows it, don't worry. No, born in it, raised in it, still in it, as you'll see. So I'm going to do an overview of the show, and we did see a lot of different interesting bits of technology, some technical trends. I'll talk about it, and then if you want to ask specifics on technology, because I assumed a lot of the other speakers after me will ask about, we'll talk about various neat things they saw. This is the thing. So, yes, I'm 41 years full-time in the business. I'm a finance VP of SMPTE. My running joke is I've gone back to assist in some of the IP standards direction and to do some restructuring of the finances. Oh, my God. My fun fact is already gone because this is my, I'm on another group, which is one of the liaisons to the NAB organization itself, and I showed them this commemorative coin still in the package from my first NAB, which is Chicago of 1970. So I was talking to Ryan, he said he was born in 1983. So my dad took me there at the age of 11. So I haven't gone constantly since then, but I worked the show in the 70s for my dad's U.S. company and took time off high school. And then in the 80s during university, he distributed the pedestals, so he took the pedestals around to the cameras. So I've been to 40 some odd NABs. I don't really know how many I've been to. So some of the NAB by the numbers, this is all stuff straight off the internet. They quoted 61 plus attendees or registrations quoted from the NAB. This is largely assumed to be based on badges. This is a bit of a controversial thing if you're on the exhibit side of the equation, because everybody in our group had at least 2 badges and they count them. So the real number is assumed to be about 50K was what everybody was talking about, and that's probably the reality of NAB. Down from 65,000 plus last year, and up from the 52,500 that went in 2022. And it's a long way from the 100,000+ that they used to quote in the show back in the heyday. I don't know if they ever got, maybe some of you remember whether or not they ever quoted 120, but it was pretty close. IBC was 43,000 verified people. So at IBC, there's only one badge. You're actually barcoded throughout the show. They had RFIDs one year. Now they use camera facial recognition. It's very closely controlled. ISC in Barcelona show that everybody's talking about these days was about 74,000. It actually hit a peak before the pandemic of 84,000. They sold 150,000 extra square feet of space at the last minute to broadcast suppliers, and a lot of the people who didn't go say they're going to go next year. So that's a very interesting show. Infocom last year is the small version. They alternate in Orlando and Las Vegas. It was 29,000. I expect Infocom this year to be 50,000 or so, maybe even higher. It's interesting that all these other shows are run by not-for-profit companies. So ISC, Infocom, and IBC are all owned by not-for-profits and run as a not-for-profit. The Canadians, we tracked the smallest number of Canadians since the 2022 pandemic show, 1 quarter or less than the 10-year peak. I have old copies of appointment schedules, and we would interact with 400 or more Canadians. We were tracking about 75 or 80. That's pretty much the same thing with a lot of the U.S. networks and, of course, international. Travel restrictions cited as one of the most common reasons for going. You're laying a lot of people off going to Vegas, even though it's not an expensive, well, it used to not be an expensive place. But travel restrictions are biggest reasons cited for not going. There's a big change. Again, I'm another organization I'm in. I actually run sort of the Americas for what's called the IABM, one of the IBC owners. So we actually take these metrics. I have a representative group of 28 North American companies, and we garner their opinions, large and small and medium companies. And the pandemic took the emphasis off shows this has continued. So nobody waits to introduce new product anymore. Some people, I thought Ross was the great standout, an anomaly of the show in that they wanted, they liked their big booth. They liked the 4-day format. They did introduce a lot of stuff, but for the most part, in the show, you don't really see anything new. Attendees were more executives. So, the broadcast business used to be about technical perfection and technical purity. Now, you talk about ROI and perfection. ROI versus technical perfection. So I would coax, I was doing even this before the pandemic, but vendors not to sit people down for a 1-hour demo of a software GUI during NAB. As I say, what do you want them to remember on Monday? And that seems to be the type of audience. A lot of people didn't want to make appointments this year. That was the other thing. You're always trying to book everybody with appointments, and a lot of people just wanted to wander around and look. The rolling hall closures created a layout with great distances to navigate. So the North Hall is closed this year. The South Hall was closed the last time. The Central Hall will be closed next year. What was, I thought, the most unusual thing from my standpoint, the exhibitors didn't notice it as much, but the fact that you had these small portions of halls with very great distances between them, I thought it was a nightmare. South Upper, 25 to 30% used. That show footprint was half the South Upper, and 7 weeks out, it was compressed to half of that again. So South Lower was about 50, was less than 50% used. The barrier cutting the hall in half was up. Central Hall was full, but there were a lot of great gaps. Most customers picked halls per day because going back and forth, and people who were kind of rookies to it and didn't realize that you couldn't practically walk from an appointment to the south to the west. And by the way, the bravado is if you walk in the front door of the South Hall and walk out the rearmost back door of the South Hall, that hall alone is a mile long. So it gives you some idea of the scale of the distances. You don't normally do that in a show, but so here's the overview. Again, the hype is this is straight off the website. So you see how the South Hall Lower and South Hall Upper are offset. The show would have been divided about here for the South Lower, and then it was probably about this much of the South Hall Upper. And then the West Hall, there's one of my coworkers is a Tesla card carrying cult fanatic, and I always tease him about it, and I just thought the Tesla thing's kind of silly. You wait for a car, you go a little bit of a distance, and it doesn't really cut much off the walking, and the waiting was. What did I just do? I turned that off. Anyways, I'll show you what a lousy photographer I am, but I'll go by the maps. So NAB organizes the show with anchor booths. So it used to be everybody wanted to be in the hip place, and to distribute the traffic to the smaller exhibitors, NAB consciously takes what they determine to be an anchor booth. So in this case, in the South Upper Hall, it was Avid, EVS, and Evertz. They had the very large booths. They're considered anchor exhibitors, and they're basically put there so that they'll draw traffic in for the people in the back. I may be being a bit cheeky here, but this wasn't on the last day of the show. This is some of the space. So this is looking out towards the front. This is looking past Evertz, and you see Avid and EVS to the front. Some of the booths. It was interesting to see IBC, which financially, by the way, came right back to where it was pre-pandemic. It was almost exactly where it was in terms of a financial versus cost cutting and a slightly reduced footprint and shortening the show by one day. But I thought that was an interesting thing to see. As you went into the back of the South Upper Hall, they had this great expansive space they were trying to consume. You could never find a place to sit and eat lunch at NAB, but there was masses and masses of empty space that were kind of reconfigured with chairs and whatnot. The South Lower Hall, again, you see the anchor booths, Blackmagic and Ross. I guess till some of the other big names here, AJA, Viz, Chiron. So that's, again, they distribute those people at the front, and hopefully, like the special in your supermarket flyer, you come in for the good price on milk and spend the rest of your time looking around the rest of the store. So that's the whole organization of the show. How many people knew that, by the way? Couple, yeah. It's just I'm telling you the secrets of the what goes on behind the scenes at these trade shows. Again, this was the shot as you stood on the top of the stairs going down. It was noticeable how much this space had been extended. This was, along with the central, was the most densely packed. The Ross booth, I believe, was the biggest booth at the show by their design, they stood out quite a bit. So as you walked into the back, you see, progressively smaller and smaller booths. And the great lament of some of the smaller exhibitors is, are these people passing all these big names and continuing on to the back of the halls? Again, the Ross booth was gargantuan. Their usual Saturday night event was gargantuan. It was their 50th anniversary. They had a gargantuan dinner, and everything about them was big. The socks, yes, the socks were everywhere. Grass Valley. So here's another interesting thing. Some of the legacy suppliers, you'll see, I believe that's pretty close to the same size for Sony, but some of the legacy suppliers, Grass Valley, Avid, and whatnot, from their, it's not that the companies have changed that much. It's just that they don't necessarily want to put the money into NAB. This is just some of the random pictures of the show, some of the Sony booth. I'm going to talk a little bit about virtual production because it was one of the technical trends of the show. SMPTE's very involved with the RIS project in terms of standards for virtual production. So it's an interesting spot, but it's interesting to see also how that had morphed. I thought this was an interesting stop. This is a purpose-built RGB white type of LED meant specifically for virtual production. So we're starting to see some, LEDs of most types can be used for virtual production, but we're starting to see some specific products that you wouldn't use for a staging or an arena or anything else, but are specific to that. Of course, this is really exhibiting the Moray issue because of my bad camera skills. These are effects panels. The picture really looks bad blown up, but anyways, it was showing a tunnel, and these effects panels are not meant to be part of the picture, but they shine the light down to look like you're passing under the shadows of the girders. So this is went to a very interesting studio called the Nant Studio, where Epic Games does a lot of their research and development, and this is one of the things that was being developed there with these effects panels for virtual production. I thought this was very interesting. So the effects panels are now RGB, cyan, and amber. So I'm still trying to learn the technical detail behind that and why that makes an effects lighting panel better. But again, we're starting to see purpose-built stuff for the virtual production space. And one thing I'll mention about it is the cinema space is taking a bit of a pause. As the pandemic went away, directors are going back to set, so they're not being used as much in cinema as we projected, but they are being used in corporate communications and in broadcast a lot more. We're seeing most of the demand for virtual production shift from the cinema space to broadcast, and the fastest growing area in broadcast, corporate communications. Canon booth, one of the mainstays. I believe they negotiated most of their people. The dress code continued to evolve. Most people didn't wear sport coats this year. Again, this is even in the central hall. There were, and this is early on in the show. There were great swaths of empty space all around the show, and I don't know what this added to the show. So this is a space, if you know, when you walk from the central hall, if you stay inside and walk up to the south upper, go to the escalators in south upper, this area is normally packed, and it kind of looked ragtag and empty. So the West Hall, the West Hall to me looked a lot less used than this shows, but because I had to go right to the back of it to get my badge, so I think this is a truncated view of it. But this is taken on the Thursday. But again, a lot of space around. The anchor booth was probably Telestream, and I believe AWS was in this space. Yes. And yeah, you see some of the other spaces that were filled with various tables and chairs, again, to make space. Imagine one of the traditional anchor booths, and again, I think a lot of the larger companies, rather than reflect on the company taking a smaller space, they just basically decide to spend their money elsewhere. Telestream, again, the anchor booth, the main thing you saw as you came in, and so the Telestream flypaper drew everybody in, and then you scattered amongst the other booths. The trends of the show. So I went in. This was my speech to my staff. Software-based production tools replacing traditional hardware-based control rooms. Everybody wants virtual control rooms. Everybody wants elastic control rooms. Everybody wants to go software running on COTS hardware. So we're finally seeing some really good software-based production tools. AI. Everybody talks about AI. There's really three types of it. Content management, which is you've got an archive, you want somebody to go in and analyze it, you want all that metadata that ports to a MAM system. That's probably the most developed side of AI. Post-production, it's there, lip sync, correcting lip sync, de-aging Harrison Ford in 24 hours. And by the way, the people who did that told me he was actually de-aged slightly for the entire movie, a little bit, not just the spot where he was supposed to look younger. And then production automation. So they don't bother exhibiting the post-production tools at NAB. I didn't see any. Production automation, say you want to run your newscast or productions without people at all. There's some and say you want to make 5 or 6 different types of media while you're concurrently running your production. So rather than make television and have it repurposed in other departments, what's the most intelligent cropping of a given scene that's going to give me all my alternate media? We saw some definite advancements in that, and that's where we think it goes. So integrated multimedia production kind of summarizes the software-based production and AI. Remote production, especially in a country where we have a lot of time zones, you can have one control room, move with the sun, and do things. And I forgot today's meeting was at AWS, but reconciling the cloud. So some workflows, so obviously everybody's going to the cloud, everybody's using the cloud, but some workflows, particularly in playout, that are not elastic, that are the same number of bits going in and out 24/7. Some of that is being rethought, but obviously when it goes to production, collaborative editing, moving content around the cloud is continuing to grow. Conspicuously absent transition to IP. Everybody's looking at it. I guess it's become part of the mainstream. I borrowed this from Imagine, so you'll see it's a Devon Croft slide, but with the Imagine logo on it. I saw this after I had written my other list. So IP, networking, and content delivery. I would say this is the whole idea of collaborative content production and collaborative content delivery in all the forms of multimedia. Artificial intelligence in all the forms I discussed. Multi-content delivery, I think these two overlap, 1 and 3 overlap quite a bit. Remote production, 4K UHD has kind of, again, become part of the workflow. And down there is virtual production. So that wouldn't have been on the roadmap, I would say, pre-pandemic. The future of NAB. Clearly, the show needs to move beyond the broadcast industry to other sectors of the media. The other shows that we're seeing grow are ones that are media shows, come one, come all, broadcasters, and again, the industrial space is growing faster. And again, the ISE show, which really has broken out as one of the big European shows that everybody's watching. We need to see a consensus on the layout issue. Again, I talked to people who were never moved from their booth and said, "Oh, what's the problem? I've been standing here all day." And for us who had different appointments at different booths, it was, to me, I don't know what it did for the show. The organizers of Infocom have told me from the time that they were half of the central hall to the time that they're now going to be completely packing the central and the west hall in June, they said they will make a small aisle as the fire marshal will let them, and they want it to feel like a kitchen party. They want to feel the vibe. They want to make it easy to navigate. And my urging to NAB is that they should look at that. And that's my sugar-eating grin again. Not bad for me talking in terms of time.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I was wondering if in 1970 there was a Canadian suite.
There was. I was telling a couple of stories about that, and some. The Canadian suite was a little bit different. The Canadian suite, we ran it until we ran it for 50 consecutive years. So it would have been, yes, the Canadian suite would have been going. It was actually a suite in a hotel. People just brought bottles of booze. And I told one story to a young man earlier. He may have to go to church afterwards. So, yeah.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Tony Mereker. And Tony has more than 40 years of experience in technology, broadcasting, and post-production industry. He currently works for his own company, Tech System, as a technical support consultant. In his career, Tony has worked for Percy 3D Media and VP Operation, Deluxe Production as VP of Production, and for Magnetic North as General Manager. Tony is affiliated with SMPTE, the Canadian Society of Cinematographer, Hollywood Post Alliance. Tony has been active with SMPTE Toronto section for many years in various board capabilities. He is currently serving as a Canadian Regional Governor. Welcome, Tony.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to take a bit of a different approach to it because I wasn't at NAB representing a company that said, there's your checklist, this is what you must do. So I went on my own, but I did attend a SMPTE governor's meeting because I'm now the Canadian governor, and that brings different responsibilities at the home office level. So I'm going to touch about things that changed since 2016, because that was the last time I was there. The board meeting, conference papers. I did attend conference papers, which I thought were very interesting, and the show itself. So to Paul's point, the West Hall, 1.4 million square feet is the details that I found, 200 acres. I grew up on a farm that was 200 acres. And that's huge. 60,000 indoor, 20,000 outdoor exhibit space, 41 loading docks. That just gives you an idea of what, and they have a bay door that's 60 feet by 32. Very much a walking show. They had the Tesla Loop. I didn't need to have a car ride to go from one place to another. All halls had plenty of unused space, like Paul said, and most exhibitors, and this is cool from when I was there last time, they have happy hour, and happy hour starts at 3 o'clock. So that was pretty good. The Sphere, nothing to do with the show, but it stuck out like a ball on the ground. 366 by 512 at its widest point. 18,000 people, over 18,000. 160,000 square feet of panels inside, 4 millimeters apart, the LEDs were. 167,000 individually, and this is all, I just got all this off the web. 4D senses, i.e. meaning fireworks went off in one of the movies and you actually smell the fireworks burning, the smoke. And I have a picture later, but the LED pucks outside had 48 diodes and they were 10 inches apart. So when you were close up, you're going like, whoa, this is going to look really bad. But when you're away quite a distance, it looks pretty awesome. There it is there. So that's the pucks on the right-hand side. That's 10 inches apart. And that picture in the middle wasn't taken that far away, and you can't really see that there are spaces between the puck. And the one on the left, that's part of the West Hall, but doesn't do much. It's so big. On the SMPTE side, I did attend a board meeting. What's changed with your membership at SMPTE, the standards are included and the virtual courses are included, i.e. the self-paced ones. Since the first of the year, 2,300, almost 2,400 standards were downloaded. So it's obviously working, that the fact that people have been asking for standards access for quite some time, so that's a win. SMPTE published an engineering paper on AI. They had a meeting about that this afternoon, or a webinar. It's been viewed 900 times, and there's the URL to go get it. It's a bit complicated to find it because it's under standards, but it's not a standard. It's under engineering papers, which is under standards. I found it a little difficult to find, but that's the URL. Educational, there has been 131 instructor given courses, and they're still a chargeable item. But there were 584 people that actually partook in self-paced courses, and you do that on your own time. Membership pricing is being offered on a monthly basis, so you don't have to wait for you don't have to do it for a year, because that's a big bill to pay. And they're working on it be offered in Canadian dollars. There is a job board that companies can actually post positions, and that's the link there. And upping the game, I call it upping the game because they won 2 Hermine awards for those 2 articles covers, which I think is a great. I think the covers are awesome, but it's nice that they were recognized for 2 awards. On the conference papers side, there were 151 or 150 conference papers that featured anything to do with AI. Of all the papers that were being offered, 50 were discussing monetization of material. The papers that I attended were some of them, 3 of them actually. How capturing a musical event and global audience enhances the immersive and speaks experience. So this is film crews going out, shooting a concert, and then post-production, and then have them for distribution through theaters, movie theaters. In 2009, Michael Jackson had his This Is It tour, 3,481 locations, and it netted $262 million. Taylor Swift's the Eras tour that just happened recently, 3,800 and $249 million. So one of the things that they were discussing was with the tour and the film being shot in the theater, they found a bunch of things that just didn't work to the experience. They found that the projectors weren't in spec. They weren't set at 14-foot Lamberts. They also found out that the theaters had their audio turned down. Now, I get that they want to turn the bulb light down so that the bulb lasts longer than they need to, But the speakers, I'm not sure. Maybe that's a legality thing. They don't want to pop somebody's ears and then be brought into court. But the biggest thing that they found was people that went to the theater didn't know how to engage. They didn't know whether or not they could stand up and tap their foot because you're in a theater and theaters are normally quiet. So what they're going to try and do in the next iteration is they want to go to concert halls, like the Massey Theater. Bring in a big screen. They got the audio, they got the seats, they got the people that know how to conduct themselves in a theater of that nature. And there are a lot of those type of venues around the country. And part of the conversation, or the guys that were on the panel talked about, cameras, what choice of cameras they were using. They didn't want to upset the audience that paid money for tickets and have a big camera sitting in front of them. So they found it a bit of a challenge. IMAX is, and all indications from the people that were on the panel is as having a comeback. There are a lot of people that want to go to IMAX to get their experience for movies, i.e. they like the big screen. Oppenheimer, I think, was a killer for them. But they're also doing concerts. They're also doing direct feeds to that environment. And one of the things that they did walk away with talk about was that all of their theaters are spec'd very tight. They don't allow it to drop off and say, okay, well, today we're going to run it at a lower rate. They don't subscribe to that. And then there were a couple of gentlemen. One was a technical lead and an operations manager for the Sphere. And they went through the whole conversation as far as, I think I have some more details here, of what it was to bring that thing online. They got 72 terabytes of storage inside that facility for playback. They built their own film camera, because of the format. So they built their own camera and their lens. They have 25 servers playing back in sync to all the displays. And one of the things they didn't talk about, but when you read between the lines, one of the reasons why it's there is they want everybody to come to one location to say, okay, this is the place where we're going to talk about Earth. We're going to talk about, being green, that everybody can come to one place and we can show what's happening to the world. What they didn't talk about was the footprint. That thing, reading between the lines, consumes a lot of power. It is huge. They've got a parking there. I didn't put the number of spaces, but they got a parking lot that is huge. It could be another one of those 200-acre deals. I did take in one of the ones I want to talk about is AI transfer for transcription and translation. And it was a guy from Avid that was talking about using AI, and his paper was on having content that's of another language that gets converted into English, shall we say, not so much for distribution, but more for editorial. There are a lot of content creators out there in different markets that only provide for the language that is from. So if there's somebody from Brazil that has a movie, AI will convert that movie into English, and then that will allow for editorial up in the US or Canada, because now you understand the language, and you can now understand what it is that's in the script and things of that nature. So that kind of made sense. Oppenheimer, there were the guys from Photocam. And so I don't know if you know this, but this was completely done in film. There was no digital camera, Arri, Sony, Venice, nothing. It was all done on 70 millimeter or 75, and some were shot in 35, if I'm not mistaken. But the whole workflow was shoot film, process it, work prints, enter negatives. I haven't seen this for many years, and the Christopher Nolan, who was the director, he only shoots film. So if you want him as a director, open up your pocketbooks because it's time for film, and there's a cost to it. And then HBO, there was I'm not sure if you guys have heard about HBO's camera assessment tour that they do. They are in their 25th year, i.e. they've done 6 sessions or 6 seasons. And they're not doing this as a camera shoot off. Give you a point on the cameras that they're using. They're using the Arri Alexa Mini. They have the Sony Venice 2, the Red V Raptor, Blackmagic Ursa 12K, Alexa 35, and film. And the whole process is that they build a set in their soundstage. They have various lighting conditions, and they take every one of the cameras through the process. They do 1, 2, 3 stops over and possibly 4 stops under. They've also done it under moonlight, so there's no light at all. And just to kind of get a feeling of what each camera can do, because back 25 years ago, they shot film for all their content. And if you wanted a different look, you just ordered up a different stock. Could have been a Fuji stock, it could have been Kodak 5316 or whatever it is. But now it's picking a camera. If you pick an Alexa, it's got a certain look to it. And when you start seeing the test camera back to camera, back to back, you start seeing some of the various nuances in various cameras. So that was pretty good. It's a 96-minute film. I'm talking to them about getting it brought up to Canada. So we're going to try and figure out a venue that has a screening and not so much audio, but more for screening quality, and then have them come up. But it was a good paper. The floor, 1,300. I think Paul mentioned that 1,300 exhibitors. 200 of them showcased AI, and again, this is all from the Google, and I don't know if you can believe Google. I couldn't find GoPro. Every year GoPro has been there, but it's been replaced by Insta360. Do you guys know about Insta360 cameras? Yep. What's that? It was a large booth, yeah. But I was trying to figure out whether they were selling cameras on the booth. I don't know if NAB allows that. If they allow on-point purchase. But Newegg, everybody knows Newegg? You buy your computer parts there? Newegg Business was on the show floor. And as a Canadian, it was nice to see Ross Everts and Imagine within the compounds of, and like Paul says, Ross was a big booth. Key exhibitors had all the crowds. So Ross, Blackmagic, they were always packed. And I found the show very disjointed. I think every hall had something to do with transmitters. Like you'd think that they'd have that figured out by now. Like transmitters are kind of like, they're focused. So yeah, I found that very interesting. So these were kind of 3 cool products. The guy on the left is a USB stick and a jump drive, and a portable drive up to 20 terabytes, but it has a key lock on it. So you can put in a 6-digit code to get it access. But I think it's the cart before the horse because a lot of companies are not allowing jump drives anymore. So yeah. Barco had their laser projector, which Back, I think many years ago, it would have been 3 times the size of that. And I was told that if you stand and look in the lens, any 20 feet, I think, is the point where you get laser surgery done. So if you want to do the laser surgery, just move your head up and down. And then Ross had its Artemo. It's art in motion is what they call it. And it's a camera that has a teleprompter, or it's a device that is robotic, has a teleprompter inside, a camera inside, and it moves up and down. It looked cool. Final thoughts. The show never fails in the networking department. It was great seeing people that you hadn't seen before, and people that were supposed to be working for a company are no longer there and they're working somewhere else. After the show, you always read something that you missed. So that never fails. Taking in the conference papers and walking the show was a big undertaking. So, and the conference papers is not cheap. So by the time you almost have to justify that, and then you're missing the show. So it's interesting. And again, happy hour was a welcoming improvement. You just walked up to any booth, said, "I'll have a beer, thank you." Walked up to the next booth, "I'll have a beer, thank you." So it was kind of cool. Las Vegas, it's a city in change. What I noticed was that it looked like it was more family oriented. Most people were walking the streets but not playing the tables, and they're heavily promoting the entertainment value. So it's the big concerts, it's the Adeles, it's the people that are on in the hotels on an extended stay. And I forgot that Vegas does everything bigger to scale than anybody else. Everything is so friggin' huge. Yeah, it's amazing. And that's me. Oh, yes, you need to click it.
Yes. Thank you, Tony. Our next presenter is Christian Scalato. He's a student, has a 4th-year media production student in Toronto Metropolitan University. He's primarily studying television production and script writing. Recently, he's also focused his study on using media and educational purposes and better adapting children programming. This marks Christian's second NAB show, as he also helped advise and supervise students at this year's showcase. Please welcome Christian.
Hey guys, hope you're all doing well this evening. I just wanted to, before I start, I just wanted to give out some thank yous and some appreciations. First off, I just wanted to say thank you to Richard Grunberg. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it today, but hopefully he is watching digitally. I also wanted to give thanks to plenty of our sponsors who are able to send us and the rest of our student body to NAB this year. More importantly, I want to give thanks to both Paul Steckley and Paul Roser. I apologize if I butchered those names, from Applied Electronics for both sponsoring today's event, but also sponsoring our trip to NAB this year. I might have gone a little overboard when it comes to designing the slides, so I do apologize. So just going to give a little introductory about myself. Again, I mentioned before, I am a 4th-year media production student at the RTA School of Media at formerly Ryerson, now Toronto Metropolitan University. As of now, I've kind of geared my studies most towards singular camera production, mostly in regards to cinematography, general production, but also more behind script writing. However, this year has been my last year before I graduate in the summer. I did start to shift my studies towards 2 major developments in the media industry. The first one being, that doesn't work, okay. The first one being virtual environment design, which is mostly just being able to adapt, create, sculpt whatever you want in a virtual environment. In regards to TMU, it's mostly been working with Unreal Engine, which I will get to that. And the second area being children's media. Considering that, again, that everyone's consuming media these days, but more importantly, that we are seeing children as young as like 2 or 3, like there's a term iPad kids who are constantly like using their devices, constantly watching YouTube videos, small kids videos, like all this giant like wave of content being available for kids. I wanted to personally study and be able to create content where not only are the children being able to expose themselves to like more educational value, maybe something that isn't going to completely turn into like brain rot as they constantly get moving, but more importantly, I want to learn how children consume. I want to learn why they consume certain types of media, what appeals to them, more importantly, how we can basically adapt that to create better media in general. This is, again, previously mentioned before, this is my second year at NAB. First year was just kind of exposing myself, getting my feet wet. But this year I kind of had a more overall kind of like theming when it came to what I viewed at NAB. This year is kind of, I kind of dub it when worlds collide, not only as creatives, but also as producers. You start to notice that there's going to be this massive shift where we move away from like traditional broadcasting, move more towards a digital environment. More importantly, that again, there's going to be two major things we're going to be talking about. And the big one, which I can probably just say this right now and move on to go get more pizza, is AI. We say AI, we see AI like constantly throughout our day. We go on the news, something about AI. We go on our phones. Hey, look, Facebook's open. Hey, Facebook has a new AI. I'm like, okay. You're just constantly producing more and more. AI is becoming prevalent not only in what we use every day, but also in regards to what we have from media. In regards to AI and NAB, there was plenty, and I mean plenty, on display over there. Not only do we have like the big companies like Adobe constantly going out there and promoting that, hey, we're going to start using generative AI. Not only do we have it already in Photoshop, we're also using it more in Adobe Audition, which is their audio software, but also in Premiere Pro. Say, for example, okay, I have this beautiful sunset scene, but the sky's looking a little blank. You can actually use a generative AI. You can actually generate clouds. Or maybe, oh, we have a fish tank that doesn't have much fish. Okay, let's put some clownfish. Let's put some rainbow fish in there. Basically, you tell Adobe what you want in your scene, and the AI will basically generate that for you. On top of that, there were other companies that were touting AI as part of their like general use, not only for singular production. For example, we have the company Enco at the bottom over there. We probably see that lady in the dress. That lady was entirely AI generated, and where they will basically program, okay, we want this news story about like, let's say there was a car crash in the 400. Okay, and this fully generated lady over here will actually describe and talk about it almost like it's like one of us, basically. It's cool, but honestly, it is also a little creepy, to be entirely honest, because the way that, like, especially that I've seen AI is everyone's saying like, oh, AI is going to improve our lives. It's going to constantly help us build this up. Personally, I see AI not only as a crutch, but I also see it as something that could be not only like more advantageous, but also something that could be potentially dangerous as well. Not only in regards to like job security, but also do a bunch of other stuff, which again, I will touch upon that later. However, there was really one interesting aspect of AI I did want to touch upon. One of the great things that I was able to do as part of NAB was I was able to attend a small press conference handled by two of TMU's instructors, Finley Braithwaite and Dr. Afsoon Sudi. They're amazingly just talking about AI and how they're able to adapt that into the classroom. It's not a case where it's like, okay, we're just going to drop AI in there and let the students figure it out. They're using AI more as like part of the curriculum, but not exactly what they'll be using for more. So say, for example, like if I'm generating a class and you guys are my students, you guys would be able to use ChatGPT or AI to basically be like, okay, let's say I have an assignment that's due tomorrow. Hey, can you tell me more about this assignment? And it'll actually give you details and better orient yourself with what exactly needs to be done as part of the program. I especially believe that when it comes to educational purposes, I feel like this can be a really great aspect for students, not only because, again, a lot of students kind of feel lost, especially when they have so much work, so much assignments constantly flooding around. I mean, I'm a last year student at TMU myself, and like the amount of paperwork I have to deal with and a lot of like digital, it's a lot. Like, again, I'm kind of fluttering over my words here a little bit, but it is a lot. And I kind of feel like, especially not only using AI in a case we're able to properly generate that towards more personal experiences, but also make everything a lot less cluttered and a lot more straightforward. I kind of feel like it would be a lot more better for students. We're moving away from basically being like, okay, did you write this in ChatGPT to like, okay, let's maybe stay away from that and use ChatGPT and AI for more general case where you're able to use it, not only to do everything, but kind of just prop yourself sort of where you want to go. The second thing I also want to touch on and want to have more of a personal connection to is virtual production. Again, as stated previously in other presentations, we are starting to kind of move away from more traditional case and move more towards virtual production. The benefits of using virtual production is not only is it more, I would say more tightly knit. You don't have to worry about like looking for a certain scene. You basically, if a producer or creator wants to visualize themselves on Mount Everest. They don't actually have to go to a top of a mountain. They can basically build a general area. You don't have to worry about like constant issues with green screen where it's like, okay, I'm wearing a green shirt and then guess I have to wear a different shirt now. But in a case where virtual environments work out, because not only is it entirely LED, but on top of that, whether it be companies like Sony, whether it be NVIDIA, or even like one of our other sponsors, Planar, where they're using these LED backgrounds, all you need to generate these backgrounds is a free software that takes like 5 minutes for you to download, and that's through Unreal Engine. Not only is that something that both TMU is promoting, but also general creators are able to get out there, go and source out Unreal Engine, and literally there are not even YouTube, but just general in-house tutorials from Epic Games and Unreal Engine. You're able to learn the software, adapt the software. Not only does it make like plenty of great opportunities for students to pick up and potentially get jobs out of it, but outside of virtual production, like what if I wanted to get into, let's say, game design? I wanted to get into game design. I can go exactly with that from the skills that are given to me from Unreal Engine. And it doesn't matter who's promoting the technology or what else they're able to do with it. I'm able to pick myself up and able to get myself a career out of it. On top of that, there were also a lot of great tools that were added that do help in regards to virtual production, particularly at the Sony booth, which was previously shown. I was able to see examples of real-time rendering, motion tracking, and also immersive cinematography that really did showcase that, again, this technology is far from anything I kind of expected to see. On top of that, especially the environments you see are almost completely fully controllable. If, let's say, for example, we have that second scene at the bottom at the Planar booth, you probably see we have a bunch of houses and stuff like that. The examples they were showing is that on a minute's notice, I can press a button, an entire background will change on a notice to be completely like vacant. So basically, it's a lot more playful. Like you can kind of get out there and have a lot more fun when it comes to productions. I'm just gonna kind of end my thoughts over here, basically. Comparing the last two NAB events I went to, those being in 2023 and 2024, I did see a lot more, I would say a general balance, whatever that was, more general balance between last year and this year. Last year, I could go out there to NAB and I could see everyone's doing like something different. RA's focusing more on their cameras. Sony's focusing more on their cameras. Planar is focusing more again on their like LED displays for for multi-use purposes. But when it comes to 2024, almost literally everybody except for a couple booths we saw before, like almost everybody was talking about AI. They were talking about virtual productions. Like that's all well and done, but like what does that mean to me as a creator, but also what does that mean to me as a student? As a creator, I think it's amazing, but again, I mentioned before, it is fully dangerous because what's stopping, like, okay, let's say I wanted to get into the industry as an editor. Okay, I know how to use the software. I know how to use Adobe. I know how to use Avid, Pro Tools, regardless. What's stopping some AI that somebody programmed in the span of like 2 weeks from them fully just taking over production, able to spice this in, and I don't have a job, basically. So it's really interesting. Like, I kind of use this analogy to one of my professors, is like, I kind of see AI almost like a wolf. Is that if you can domesticate it, if you can properly train it and properly utilize it, it will become your best friend. Otherwise, if you're not paying attention, it can bite you in the hand. And overall, as a student, it does, like, again, it is a lot of information. It is very overwhelming. Like, I didn't want to just have my presentation be like, this is what I saw at NAB. Here's Adobe. Here's this. I didn't want that. Because at the end of the day, there are so many paths that a student can go down when it comes to how they want to move around in the industry. I've shown you my interests, and I guarantee you everybody else in the with here today has their interests as well. I think it just comes down to not only how you want to like approach and adapt with the media you see in front of you, but also more importantly, in cases of what I've seen from NAB today, it basically comes down to how will you be able to take the stuff, how will you be able to adapt to the stuff that you see today and make it for your use in the better in the tomorrow. I'm probably starting over my words again a little bit. But again, I do thank you very much for attending the presentation today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I hope you guys have a great day.
Thank you very much, Christian. Our next presenter is Stéphane Gagnon, mobile engineer in charge, technical producer, and project manager. Stéphane Gagnon is a mobile engineer in charge, a technical producer, and project manager on productions such as FIFA World Cup, MLB World Series, World Junior Hockey Championship, and locally the Canadian Premier League and Toronto Blue Jays. He's also helped to facilitate broadcast infrastructure projects with media partners such as Major League Baseball, Roger Media, MLB Network, NHL Network, Broadcast Service, International, Media Pro Canada, US, TVA Sports, and he's a professor at Humber College in the BRTV broadcasting program. Please, if you want to contact him, Stefan Engineer at gmail.com. Please welcome Steph.
That's really long. I should have shortened that. I'm a freelance broadcast engineer. I work for a little bit of everybody. So, I mean, every day is not every day, but it's I work for a lot of different clients. My take on NAB is a little bit different. I'm going over some of the things Paul went over a little bit too, a little bit more of the trends. I do a lot more sort of live production, mostly in sports. So it's not going to be all cameras and mobiles. One of the trends I found was, that's the first night of NAB. Nice sunset. I found the show was quite quiet, a little bit muted. I didn't go last year, 2023. I went in 2022. That was kind of a post, I think, COVID. Everyone was excited to be back. I didn't quite feel that this year. And are we good on the Amazon Chime login? I don't have any, actually, any text. It's mostly just some pictures I took. Similar, some of the trends I saw was very high dot pitch LEDs, a lot of curved LEDs. I think LEDs are really in the point now where they make really good backgrounds. Obviously, virtual production is a big deal now. But also, I think from the last few years where the LEDs were really kind of used as very high-end backgrounds, they're becoming just part of the landscape for booths and for as well as production. Motion traction obviously was a big one. I also have pictures of the Sony booth. I don't know if this video is going to play here. We'll try this. I thought this was kind of neat with the U.S. election coming up. This is from the Planar booth. It's kind of a, are we going to play? Maybe. There it is. Okay. Don't worry about the audio. It's kind of like the big board, but it's a touchscreen LED, which I hadn't seen before, and I could see this being used a lot for election coverage. It's not quite virtual production, but it kind of is. It's a weird merger I found, so I thought that was kind of neat. I don't know if that. I mean, what that looks like afterwards, if you get covered in, fingerprints and everything else. I don't know how it would look on camera. It looks okay on an iPhone, obviously. So that was neat. There we go again. There we go. I'm just highlighting some of the products I thought were interesting. This is Sony's 5G camera that they had with, they've cut a deal with, who was it? It'll come to me in a sec. T-Mobile in the U.S. Sorry, I know they've deployed this with some of the MLB teams in the U.S. I know they're talking with some of the other sports teams. Basically, it was a 4K 4K HDR, 60 frames a second with a 60 millisecond delay, one antenna with basically in line of sight. But it's a private 5G network as opposed to going on the public 5G network. So I guess, if you buy this product, you have to get some sort of relationship going with some 5G carrier to make it work, I think. I don't know how this would work on the public, especially like I work a lot at the Rogers Center. And if you have 50,000 people in the Rogers Center or just over 40,000 now, this might not work terribly well. Some other things I saw, that's just the description of it. They were saying 60 milliseconds. It's hard to really tell. It's all HEVC, super ultra low latency, but it looked pretty good. Other thing I noticed, one of the trends was there's a lot of these, I know Ross had a new Ultrix router, and they had a touch panel on the front of the actual router, which I hadn't seen before. Evertz had something similar with one of their next routers. And then this is a little spectrum monitor that Shure put out. So it backs up with their sort of wireless RF workbench. But, you have a rack unit and it actually shows you everything before you do a scan to look for new microphones and things like that. I thought that was kind of neat, this idea of you don't have to use your laptop, you don't have to use a some sort of web browser to talk to your gear. You can just physically go up to your router panel and see the temperature and see all sorts of fun stuff. 2110. 2110 is a little bit everywhere. To I think Paul's point earlier, it's not like 2110 is coming. There was actually some products to look at. We did an RFP to do a 2110 control room at the Rogers Center in 2019. COVID hit. We sort of went back to baseband and went with 1080p HDR. And one of the questions we had in 2019 at NAB was, I want to put a monitor in the middle of center field for some sort of presentation, and I'm 2110. What's that going to look like? What's that gear? What is that? Am I converting to something and then putting it on fiber out to center field? Or is it a box like this? Well, here we are 5 years later, and here's the box. Don't know if it works. I'm assuming it does. It's one of their products. But it's also nice because it's 5G as opposed to 3G, which it would have been 5 years ago. Stosh isn't here to talk about this, so I'll talk about it a little bit more. Fuji had some interesting new lenses. This is a Sony, I believe it's a 5500 with a full-size sensor, and then this lens is 1,000 millimeter. So it's about a 200, what we in video would call a 250 by lens. And if you get behind it, it's the biggest lens I've ever seen. And then you stick it on the front of basically a Sony production sports camera. So you can see the zoom here kind of starts at 25 millimeters and goes down to 1,000 with an extender, which I was sort of blown away by, which was cool. Stosh isn't here. I didn't have a big list of things to talk about, but this is one of them. There's repping locally, there's a small group out of Ottawa called Stripe Studios, and they have this little thing on the bottom right-hand side. They do the graphics and the bugs for Sportsnet and TSN for a lot of, if you're watching the Leafs game tonight, you're going to be watching their product with the score and the time and everything. But they've built this little handheld unit at the bottom, which is a computer with, right now it's a 4K Matrox card, but they're going up to an 8K Matrox card in it, which basically allows you to do a telestrator, allows you to do basically anything you can do with a graphics card, but it's about the size of my laptop. It's actually quite small. That's the actual size compared to an iPad. So that's kind of neat. So if a lot of the big US networks came and looked at that. So the idea here would be in your control room, in your mobile truck, you have this little unit, which is the size of an iPad. You connect it by fiber or by Wi-Fi up to an iPad as the telestrator in your booth, and you just launch the app and you have an instant telestrator. Apparently, maybe I shouldn't say it, but they had this software is free to download without all the bells and whistles, and they had 600 downloads the first day of NAB, so good for them. What else did I have? I thought this was kind of neat. New cartony video head with everything sort of digital on top. So you'll get your camera guys that will say, yeah, for sure it's straight. My bubble's level. Well, yeah, it's actually level at 0, 0, 0. Anyone who does live production knows what I'm talking about. This is kind of neat. There's a Cobalt router. It's a 64 by 64 12K router. It's only 4 inches thick. So you mount that in a truck, you mount that in an air pack, and then you're suddenly you're leaning into the rack to kind of, you don't even need a rack to actually hook it up, and then traditional router panels to connect to it, and then the rest of the control services is kind of the same. This was a DJI Ronin 4D, I think it's called. So it's attached to a car on the bottom left or on the left side. And then the camera unit is sort of separated from the camera body, and then it's got a wireless built into it. And it's all on the Ronin DJI sort of floating head. And then it's fully wireless. I think it was zoom control on the left, focus on the right, and then wireless video. So you could basically drive in a chase car or be in the back of that car or be anywhere you want and still sort of drive that camera. I think the car actually had 4 of them attached. So you can imagine it was pretty crazy. Oh, yeah, here's I don't know quite why this was at NAB. I think it's for first responders. This is a partnership with AT&T. I think it's a Boston Dynamics robot. Oh, no, I wasn't that. Did anyone kick it? The gimmick with it? I don't know. Let me try and play the video, though. Did you kick it? Is it going to go? Oh, no. Come on. Oh, it's going to my Google Drive. Let's try that. Oh, it's playing my Google Drive. Maybe this will work. It didn't do any flips or anything. It's look kind of neat. I think it's got a camera on the front and some sensors. I don't know how. I guess AT&T would sort of tie into how it would probably 5G back to where it needs to go. And other than that, I mean, nothing really blew me away at NAB. A couple of the vendors I talked to, AJA in particular, I asked them, what's new? You know, are you guys introing anything? And they said, we've just fixed our supply chains. So that's our big thing for this year. So you don't have to wait 6 months to a year for our products. We'll introduce new stuff at IBC. So, okay. What else? And then same thing as Paul and Tony were saying. I felt it felt very empty. It took me from the South Hall to the West Hall 25 to 30 minutes to really walk it, and most of that is empty space. And then you go through sort of a construction area. And so I don't know if they're going to condense it next year, but North Hall's closed next year. So, and yeah, that was my fun experience at NAB.
Our next presenter in the meantime is Noor Hassan, with 10 years of experience in the broadcast space. Noor is currently solution architect at AWS, enabling broadcast independent software vendor to realize their industry superpower by developing broadcast offering in the cloud. Prior to joining AWS, she worked with numerous global customer as solution engineer for Evertz Microsystem and managed solution architecture for compression workflow. In this presentation, we also have Brian Samis. Brian Samis is a principal solution architect at Amazon Web Service, specializing in broadcast media workflow. He has over 15 years of industry experience deploying live video workflow at some of the largest companies in the media industry. So please welcome Noor and Brian.
All right, so we are going to take a bit of a different spin on this. But first of all, we want to welcome you to the AWS office. We appreciate you taking the time to be here, especially on a Leafs game night. All right, so hopefully everyone's trip back home will be eventless tonight. So we're going to take a bit of a different spin or a lens because we are representing AWS, so we've spent a lot of time prepping for the NAB demos and manning the booths and doing other stuff. But what's really interesting from our lens is that we had 70 unique demos during NAB and spanning different solution areas for media and entertainment. And we featured more than 80 partners. Right? So I personally come from the partner organization. So a lot of the work that we do is enlarged with the help of partners across the board. And today we'll focus a bit more on the broadcast lens because both Brian and I focus on that for NAB. But if you're interested in any of the different areas, please do reach out. We'll be more than happy to provide the information. We launched 3 new AWS services at NAB. AWS Cleanroom, Machine Learning, AWS Deadline Cloud, and AWS Elemental Workflow Monitor. And we were lucky and grateful to have 2 Best in Show and 2 Product of the Year awards. So, kind of zooming in on the live production and the broadcast side of things for NAB, we split up into 4 demo areas. We had a newsroom activation that I was part of. We had a representation for live cloud production and newsroom that is story-centric. So that was a bit different from the newsroom activation, and I'll show you that in a second. We also focused a lot on operations monitoring, layout, and distribution, so a lot of observability, and Brian will cover a lot of that as well. And so part of the newsroom activation, we actually produced NAB show live. So we had a Good Morning NAB that was produced during the show for the first 3 days. And so we have themes. So every NAB, we focus on specific themes, and these themes are based on feedback we get from customers and what customers are interested in seeing, right? So there is a common theme that keeps repeating, which is end-to-end workflow. So if you were at NAB, you visited the West Hall, you'd have noticed that you would come into the AWS booth and you'll see an end-to-end story. So you will start all the way from producing content into media supply chain and archive, into broadcast. So the different areas of broadcast, we have a content ingest, layout, distribution. There is the live cloud production. News was a heavy one this year as well. And then direct to consumer, and also monetization and machine learning relative to these workflows. Gen AI, folks were talking about Gen AI, that was not too different for us, obviously relative to specific workflows. So within these kind of demo areas, we wanted to address things like, how do we deploy infrastructure as code? How do we make it easier to deploy these large systems? How do I have an end-to-end observability view? And again, that's something Brian will dive into. How do I bring up infrastructure and bring it down? So especially for ad hoc workflows versus 24/7. How do I have a NOC view of everything that is happening in the system? How do I produce news? So news was a really big theme for us at the trade show. So because we had 70 demos, right, we don't have a lot of time to go through them. But what we wanted to do here, we actually published these demos, right, across the different 6 solution areas. So if you're curious to know what they are, this information is public. So feel free to scan the QR code, right, and take a look at your own time. Do reach out to any of us if you have any questions. I'm just going to give it a second for folks to do so. All right. And so I'll speak a little bit about newsroom activation. So first, I'll show you a very high-level overview. We had different sections for this entire experience to happen. So we had essentially the control room. We built a fishbowl within our booth. So that was the control room, the producer, executive producer were there. We had some operators. So this was in collaboration with NAB broadcast crew. So the same crew that produces the NAB show every year actually collaborated with us. So the setup was in the morning till afternoon, we will produce the show in AWS. So the entire end-to-end workflow was running in the cloud. Except hardware. So except cameras, we had some on-prem encoders, embedders to take in audio and baseband feeds and essentially flip that into the cloud. Everything else was running in the cloud. Everything from switching to routing to intercom to audio mixing, right? All of that was running in the cloud. And then in the afternoon, we would switch so that the NAB crew would take over and they would go back to Fort Lauderdale, which is where they normally do their production. The crew remained the same. We had roving reporters throughout the trade show, so that was a really fun project. So we had the control room in the West Hall. If you came in and you saw a studio, so that was part of the activation. And then, we had the workflows running in the cloud. And then in Fort Lauderdale, they had access to some of mainly the intercom panels, right? So because some of their crew, their directors, their producers were remote as well. So this is what it looked like. The picture on the left-hand side is the control room. That's the fishbowl where our crew, in collaboration with our partners, in collaboration with the NAB broadcast team, were sitting there and they were essentially producing Good Morning NAB every day of the show. They were producing that while having roving reporters who were using live view backpacks. And we used Telos Alliance, for example, for intercom and audio mixing. So all the comms were happening. And then the picture on the right-hand side, if you were there and entered into the West Hall, this is the activation space, right? So we actually built a studio. Even this part has been fully in collaboration with our partners. For example, Alpha Video for to help us from a system integration standpoint. There's like, more than 80 partners, so I can't really list them. But what I'm saying is that we can't do this without our partners. So we had the studio here, and then essentially we had actual live interviews every day on schedule, like you would produce a proper news show. The last bit I will talk about before handing over to Brian for some really cool stuff. So we, inside the booth, right, we had different pods. So broadcast focused on, like I said, different areas. So news was one of them. We also featured news as part of the pod for news-centric. So we're using things like Mimir. We're using Sienna as well, and some of our other partners to produce news or story-centric news style for customers who are looking for that type of workflow. And then for the live cloud production part, we focused a lot this time on infrastructure as code, right? So we were showing parallel demos. The one on the left-hand side is essentially showing you how you can spin up and spin down an environment using infrastructure as code and diving into that. And then the one in the middle was essentially an example of an outcome, right? So in this case, it was Redal or Simply Live replay, for example. We had Sony Switcher featured for the first time at our booth, and so on. So it was less focused on what each, let's say, partner solution does, and more, okay, how do you bring that together and use infrastructure as code? Because that's one of the biggest kind of feedbacks that we've been getting from our customers. I will skip the architecture diagrams for that, but we're happy to discuss offline, and also the page that we directed you to has all that information. So with that, I'll hand it over to Brian.
Great, thanks, Noor. So as Noor mentioned, like similar to kind of on the live production side, in previous years when we've done these shows, the big focus has been on proving to people that, yes, this stuff is possible in the cloud. Yes, you can do live production in the cloud. Yes, you can do play out in the cloud. This year we decided to take a slightly different approach because in our opinion, and I think in most of the industry's opinion, we've kind of proven that this stuff is possible. And I think most people believe us now that, you can do live production in the cloud, you can do play out in the cloud. And the proof really is in the pudding. I mean, when it comes to live production, we've now had both ESPN as well as NHL Network go live to air with productions that were done completely in the cloud. And when it comes to things like playout, we now have over 3,500 live playout channels running from AWS at any given point. So, these are proven and mature workflows, and we didn't feel the need kind of this year to just, show people, hey, look, you can do this. We decided to take it one step further and kind of address the pain points of people who have actually deployed these workflows and tried them out and found some of the rough edges. One of the big pieces of feedback we've gotten from customers who've deployed master control and play out and distribution type workflows from the cloud for broadcast is that, while the workflows work and they're possible, in many cases, they weren't having the same level of kind of control and observability as they're used to on-prem. So for example, a broadcast engineer on-prem, if they're trying to troubleshoot a signal somewhere, they may be able to route a signal to a scope to take a look at, what the different levels are. They may want to crawl back to the control room and, plug a cable into a DA somewhere to take a look at, different points along the signal path. So the real objective of our demo this year was to kind of show that you can get that same level of observability and control in your cloud-based workflows as you can get with on-prem workflows. So I'm going to start kind of on the very left-hand side of this booth because I know there's a lot to see here. But on the very left-hand side, you'll see there's kind of our source ingest monitoring panel. So that's where we actually have kind of the multi-viewer views of all of the different sources that are coming into environments. As well as you'll notice just underneath, we have both a cloud-based scope that was from our partner Leader, as well as a physical hardware scope as well. And there were buttons on this dashboard. I think I have a close-up of it here. There were buttons, so for each source, you can actually just push a single button route to scope, and that would actually send it to both the Leader as well as the on-prem hardware scope, so you could take a look at the source as it's coming in. And every single one of these sources had both a primary and a backup source as well, and the ACO could be manually controlled by clicking a button on this dashboard as well. So you could let it fail over automatically, or the operator could manually fail over or back between the sources as necessary. We're also providing like a whole bunch of information on this dashboard to help monitor and control these sources. So you can see things like audio levels. You'll also get alarms for things like frozen picture and color bars and those sorts of kind of typical things. And you can see some of those alarms that are being kind of listed here in the graph view. The other cool thing, as Noor mentioned, is that the backbone of this whole kind of MCR environment that we created here was actually a broadcast router in the cloud, and we've actually created a real-time visualization as well of the current cross points of that router. So as you manipulate things, as you route things to scopes, as you switch over sources, you'll actually see these cross points change in real time, so you have an idea of what's going where at any given point. Once we get through kind of the source monitoring, the next piece that typically happens is the channel playout. So what we wanted to show here was the fact that you have a live source coming in. You can use this little drop down here to choose which live source is getting routed to your playout engines, because you may have different live sources feeding different channels at different points. As well as things like infrastructure monitoring. So you can actually see for each of your playout engines, how much CPU is being used, how much memory, how much disk, all that sort of stuff. And then one of the things we did that was pretty interesting is we also embedded into this monitoring dashboard the actual playlist status from the playout engine. So you can actually see, in the same view as the infrastructure control and as the same view as all of the different pips to see the full motion video, you can also see kind of what the actual playlist is that's running on the playout channel, in addition to actually going in and making changes. Like, for example, if you want to take next, or if you want to, jump to the live source, you can access all of that from the same dashboard. So what we're really kind of hoping to show with these demos is that with these cloud-based workflows, not only can you get this full visibility, but you can also control these workflows in a way that's in many ways actually better than what you can do on-prem, because you can do it all from a single pane of glass. You don't need to switch between different windows to get your playlist in one place and look up at a multi-viewer to see your pips in a different place. You can kind of see it all in kind of a workflow-centric view for a particular channel or a particular group of channels. I'm going to jump forward now to what we did for distribution. So now that we've played out our channel, we need to send it places. So for this particular example, we were using our partner M2A to handle SRT distribution to a number of endpoints around the Western United States, as well as Canada. So you can see in the top left-hand side there, we have a little map view with different colors, and that's actually showing the health of each of the SRT endpoints that's receiving this particular playout channel. So you can see, for example, our receiver in Denver is currently down and is not receiving the feed right now. So that's giving you kind of a real-time visualization and feedback as to what's actually happening on the receive side. So it's not just in this case a fire and forget. You're actually getting real-time feedback from the receivers, so you can see whether they're connected, what their latency is, the packet loss, those sorts of metrics. Similarly, you can see the receiver in Los Angeles. The actual receiver is green, but the line is orange. So what that's telling us is that the receiver is actually successfully receiving the stream, but that one of the metrics that we're monitoring, in this case something like the round trip latency or the packet loss, is slightly above the threshold that we've identified. So it is showing that it's orange, but it actually still is connected and receiving the stream, so it's not completely offline. So that's kind of the nuance between those two. And then the next thing we're doing with the same feed is we're actually feeding it through an ATEM distribution encoder. So you can see, there's thumbnails along the top showing the current encoder view of what's actually being encoded. And the ATEM encoder is creating an MPTS StatMux of those 4 feeds that we were creating. And then that's then being sent to an NSYS to do the ATSC3. I don't know what you call it. It's not packaging, I guess, inserting all the metadata and all that sort of stuff. And then what we were doing is we're bringing back that ATSC3 stream to our booth, where we actually had a physical RF ATSC modulator on the booth, and we were feeding that into an actual ATSC receiver. So we're basically creating a fully ATSC3 compliant stream completely in the cloud, and then just bringing it back on-prem for the modulation. The very last piece that I haven't touched upon yet is on the playout side. We were also showing off, as part of this kind of infrastructure automation, the ability to create pop-up channels on the fly. So using our playout vendor that we were partnered with, which was BC Next for this demo, they had the ability in their platform where you could actually just import a channel playlist, essentially, which was a JSON file of the channel playlist. and that would automatically spin up a new, EC2 instance, a compute instance to run the channel playout. That would also then automatically trigger a workflow that would create an SRT distribution path to whatever endpoints you specified. And then it would automatically create all of these monitoring dashboards that we've just showed you for that channel dynamically on the fly. And then as soon as you delete the channel, it all gets torn down automatically as well. So that was what we were showing in monitoring and distribution and control, and happy to talk about it later if anyone has any questions.
Do you want to share how this was created, like a Grafana side of things?
Yeah, so basically all of these dashboards that we're showing you here were created in a piece of software called Grafana. If anyone's not familiar with Grafana, it's basically an open source platform that allows you to create custom dashboards. What we ended up doing, because you may see some things here that, like things like live video and playlists, those are not kind of native Grafana components. So we actually ended up creating a few custom widgets as part of this project in order to support building these types of dashboards. But the really cool thing is that all of these dashboards are fully defined as code. So they're completely just like a JSON file that essentially defines this dashboard. So when you create a new channel, it's very, very easy to just automatically basically spit out a JSON configuration for a dashboard to monitor all of the resources that get created in order to run that channel. So that's how we were kind of able to do the automation for the pop-up channels, and how we were able to kind of build all these different widgets, like for example the router cross-point monitoring and the control buttons for the ACOs and that sort of stuff. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Our next presenter is François Legrand, Senior Director Engineering. Bear with me. François Legrand joined CBC Radio-Canada in 2004, has a broadcast system designer. I can say in French, it's going to go faster. In his role, he has been involved in a wide range of projects and has had various responsibilities, including design and digital television and radio system, as well as project management across different scale. From 2011 to 16, he held several management positions where he coordinated the technological development of Quebec regional station and played a pivotal role in transitioning all-nation news show and automated production. François is currently the Senior Director of Engineering, where he oversees the team responsible for implementing all CBC Canada IT and broadcast infrastructure project. In his free time, François is an avid maker with interest in 3D printing, CNC machining, and microprocessor-based electronics. He also served as a lead mentor for the first robotic competition team 9234. I hope it's not a year. Les Ailes d'Or, hoping to inspire the next generation of engineers. François is frequently invited to present CBC Radio-Canada initiative to technological vision at conferences such as IBC, NAB show, and various SMPTE and ABU events. Welcome, François.
Thank you, Lawrence. Yeah, I'll take it. So sorry for the little technical problem. So my goal at NAB was to have a deeper look on software-based infrastructure. So that's my main topic. But before explaining what I saw there, I just want to take 5 minutes of your time to explain why I went to NAB looking for software-based infrastructure. I have a quick page of definition. Obviously, we can see that the Google Drive to PowerPoint export needs some improvement because it didn't look like that. So when I talk about software, it's true software that runs on x86, ARM, it may or may not use CPU, but it's not software that runs on FPGA. So when I say software, it's actual software for CPUs and GPUs. I will use commercial off the shelf when I say CUTS. It's a server that is designed for another industry. It's not a piece of gear designed for the broadcast, because I truly believe that other industries like the AI industry or the general IT industry, they move at a much faster pace than us. And it's to our benefit to leverage those technology and try to work the way they were designed to work, not to try to twist them into how we work. So that's why I believe that CUTS comes from another industry than broadcast. I know it's an AWS facility, but personally, when I say software, I don't care where you want to run that piece of software. If it makes sense for a specific workflow to use the cloud, use the cloud. If it makes sense to run it on-prem, go on-prem. And I don't want to enter that debate of cloud versus on-prem. It's sterile. It depends on use case, and run that software wherever you want. And I strongly believe that software will eventually, sooner probably than most people think, replace most traditional hardware-based solution for live broadcast production. However, saying that, I believe that as of NAB 2024, there is serious problem with doing real production in software. And this is maybe a little bit different to what I'm telling you at work. At work, I'm go, it's there, we go all in. Here, that's the true story I'm telling you guys tonight. So as of today, if you have a process, a service, an application, or a virtual equipment that is larger than what can fit on a single server, you are in trouble. So a lot of the use case you saw from the AWS demonstration, and nothing against the AWS, but the Simply Live application, it's a lift and shift of their current application. They moved it to the cloud, and you cannot run that instance bigger than what fits on a single server. And very often, this is not enough to replace an actual physical machine. So that's a dirty secret of all those demonstrations. The other problem today is that most products are designed to solve a single problem very well. A good example is Spalk. This is a tool you can use online to do commentary of sports event. It does only one thing, but it does it really well. Or there's other vendor that are doing just okay at an end-to-end workflow. And very often end-to-end, what I saw at NAB this year, it's not just glass camera to live glass on air, but they also try with the same tool to solve all the file-based and VOD problem with a single tool. So that tool, yes, it does the whole workflow, but it's just okay at everything. It's not great at nothing. So that's another, and it was the same with NAB this year. So as an end user, I like to build workflow using best of breed software, so I can get the best of everything. But that creates other problem, because us guy, I believe that typically we like to use uncompressed video. Why? Because it's low latency, it's high quality, and to replicate that in software today from one compute node to the other one, you have to use 2110, and I'm a strong proponent of 2110. However, it was designed by hardware engineer to solve or to respect hardware constraint that doesn't exist in software and doesn't exist in whether it's in the cloud or locally. So a good example is that in 2110, your traffic needs to be well behaved. You need to send packet at a very regular pace. And honestly, software CPU don't work like that, and they don't care about packet pacing. But we waste a lot of time doing that. And while doing that, we had latency, and we require specific network cards or specific driver that are costly. So in reality, all the demonstration we saw that were multi-vendor, and it was the same on AWS booth, they use NDI or SRT to exchange signal between all those partners. And both NDI and SRT are great technology, but if it is just to carry video from one compute node to another compute node that sits in the same placement group, or even worse, on the same server, it adds a lot of latency for no great benefit. and it reduced the video quality. And another dirty secret to try to make those demos work good, and it was the same everywhere, they were running NDI at like 300%. So we asked them, what do you mean running NDI at 300%? So basically, they take the bit rate and they just bump it up until it looks okay and they can do the demonstration. So that's another one of the and everyone was doing that on their booth, not just AWS, but everyone. But I believe that there's better way to, the other thing we saw in a lot of the demonstration, this is a screen grab from the GV forum on the first day, where they were basically, I call them left to right workflow. You take sources, you do some kind of processing, you distribute, and that's it. And those workflow, they are always used as demonstration because they are quite immune to latency. There's no two-way shaking between the control room and the set. The actual show is probably done in a truck, traditional truck. No software there, no cloud there. So it is quite fast and low latency. And then it's called production, but it really is just distribution. And distribution is much more forgiving on latency. However, real production, well, you do stuff a little bit differently. So this shot here is one of the well-known show in Radio-Canada. It's called Tout le monde en parle. And this guy, he's a singer from Ottawa. And on that shot, you see basically a direct view from the camera, a view through a monitor that comes from the control room of the same guy. And if you try to replicate that in software today, it doesn't work. Because as soon as the guy is going to move, you will see him move in the monitor 250, 300 milliseconds after, and it's not going to look right. Another use case, this right there was a demonstration of David Ross launching the new Artimo camera that I believe is a great product. And basically, that kind of shot, if you have too much latency, it doesn't work either. You need some kind of immediate feedback. And there's a lot of similar application in real production. So I went to NAB with the expectation to find solution that although they are software, they try to solve that latency problem. And Anthony Kuzub is there. At work, he never says latency by himself. He always say, what do you say at? Yeah, but you used to call it destructive latency because latency always doesn't help to do great storytelling. The other thing is, do we have some Ross representative in the room? No, you need to get your color correction straight because that wasn't really good. Okay, but I believe there is hope out there, and I was going at the show to learn more about where GV is with their M platform, and I was looking for multi-vendor. And I was a bit disappointed about the multi-vendor thing of those framework, but we'll learn about that later. So there is framework in the market right now, or if it's not framework, it's, well, we can call that whatever we want, but are trying to really address two things: latency and multi-vendor in software. On-prem in the cloud, it works for both. GVM, Origin, and NVIDIA were the one I was aware before going at the show. I learned about another one that I find quite interesting, which is Cisco, Intel, and Rust together that did a very good demonstration of software-based production with very low latency. And I learned also about Diversified that is launching. It was presented as a concept. It's not a product yet. But basically, their Diversified is an integrator. Do we have Diversified representative in the room? Okay, I will be careful. So Ken, you told me to go see the demonstration. And basically, it's interesting because Grass Valley is a software vendor that competes with Evertz, EVS, Rust. So how will they be able to bring those vendors into their platform? It's not clear. Diversified is an integrator. So their business was always to put people together. So they did an interesting demonstration. It's still a concept of a platform where you could pick and choose a bunch of different application from different vendor on their platform. And there's another one that I wasn't aware, which is called Media Anywhere, that is launching such a similar platform. The interesting thing is that the people behind Grass Valley, the people behind Origin, and the people behind Media Anywhere, they all went to the same school. They all grew up together. They all work at the same company. And guess who was that company? It's Quantel. So a lot of that was actually born at Quantel many years ago. So we'll go through the first one by one. So GVM from Grass Valley, it's basically they want to become the Apple Store of the broadcast industry. They have a platform, they sell application. You can buy application, connect them together in software, build a workflow. Right now, if you go in the store, I went to the store this morning, in fact, this afternoon, and in reality, the native app, there's nothing but Grass Valley app. So it's not quite yet multi-vendor, although they announced some partner at NAB. Another thing they announced, which is quite interesting, it's called AMP Grid. And basically, AMP Grid is a way to go around the problem that today you cannot fully replicate a K-frame XP in software because that doesn't fit on a single server. So what they do is that they tie a bunch of servers together. They use a protocol called Rocky V2. And if you never heard about it, I encourage you to do some reading about it. It's really interesting because it allows all the GPU on all the nodes and all the CPU on all the nodes to share the same memory. So you can build application bigger than what fits on a single server. And this is quite interesting. This says that's going to ship in April 2024. That ends in a week, and I'm not sure it will really ship, but it should be soon. And the other interesting thing is that they will release later this year a version of the XIP card that basically the gateway inside the density frame can directly write into the memory of the server, again, to shave latency and to go with pixel level latency, not multiple frames latency. So we'll see when that's going to be released. So that was a new announcement. I find some quite interesting. The other thing that Grass Valley announced is that now there is some clarity on what is the model to become a partner and sell application on their platform. So everyone, including us, I'm not a developer, but if I want to try it, I can go on Grass Valley website, download the toolkit, and start to develop application for free. I cannot deploy them on the platform for free because they need to be certified. That comes at a cost, but I was told that the cost is fairly low. It's like a few hundreds to low $1,000 to certify your app on the platform. And then they want to make money by selling your application to their client. And basically, the monetized portion with 2-star, this is much more expensive. So they will take about 30% cut on every app sold on their platform. And that's really similar to what Apple is doing. So that wasn't clear. Now it's clear. They will take 30% of the cost of an app, and the SDK is free to use. I'm curious to see their competitor who's going to be happy to share 30% of the revenue of an application to be on their platform. I'm not convinced. I'm convinced startup will be interested. Big player, not sure. Then there is another thing that they announced is that they have 3 kind of partner. They have what they call the affiliate. An affiliate, it's interesting because it's a validated partner solution with no direct product integration. That's going to be easy to validate partner when you don't integrate with them. So GV affiliate, yeah, okay. A good example of that is a lens on a camera. Yes, you have to integrate somewhat, but not that much. Then there is GV Connect, which is you do an integrated solution using SDKs and you have integration. Good example of that would be data miner. So you can control JVM from data miner using their SDKs and API. But still, that kind of application, you don't exchange media in real time. So I don't want to say it's easy, but compared to exchanging low latency video audio data in real time, yes, it is easy. So to do that, then there's the JVM native, where then you are a partner on their platform, fully integrated. I was expecting some new announcement, and basically out of all those logo of partner that they're claiming they have, partner that's really integrated on the audio and video layer, there's only one. It's RT Software. So that was a disappointment to me. However, two partners told me that they decided during the show, talking to Grass, that they will integrate as a first-class citizen, and it is Llama. So Llama will release their mixed virtual audio console part of the software with full native integration. And the other one is Frameformer. Frameformer, this one is also interesting because it's a frame rate converter. And that's going to be, I guess, the first application where it really is a competitor to Grass Valley on their platform that really is a competitive application. And it will be interesting to see the price difference between the GV version and the competitor's version. So that was a bit of a disappointment because I was expecting more partner that really integrate. The other one we wanted to have an update on is another framework, which is called Matrox Origin. Matrox Origin concept really is interesting because 2110 is fully synchronous from source to destination. But in reality, our eyes, my mouth, my ear are synchronous. What happens as a processing in between, as long as it is processed at no later than a specific time, I don't care when it is processed. So to make the whole processing in between asynchronous, really have the potential to speed up things. And Matrox, basically, they want to offer an SDK to the industry where third party can leverage that SDK to build application that will be asynchronous, and that would allow application on one server to share actual video frame with an application or a service on another server just by sharing memory. And again, you don't share video frames, you share pointer in memory, and you have to read the data through the NIC. But it's a concept that can be much faster than real time when you create complex processing pipeline because you don't have that synchronicity requirement. It works on-prem, it works on the cloud also. It was demonstrated at the AWS booth last IBC. I'm not sure if it was demonstrated at NAB also. So it works both. So again, you don't care, is it on-prem, in the cloud, same concept, work everywhere. What is new at NAB 2024 for Matrox Origin? They have now a new HTML5 Ceph-based graphic rendering engine. Ceph-based, this is a Chromium embedding framework. So basically, it's simplified version of it is your HTML5 graphic are rendered into a Google Chrome window full screen. It's not that, but it's a way to see it. I'm a strong believer in HTML5 graphics workflow, by the way. They also demonstrated a large-scale demonstration where they had a 20-layer production video switcher with full 2D DVE on each one of the layer running on a single host. And all that 20-layer 2D DVE was all processed within a single video frame, where with traditional technology, you would accumulate frames of latency. In their case, they don't, so that was good. They bring some clarity on their business model, and basically it wasn't clear to me before who's the actual client to Matrox for that framework. Is it me as an end user? Is it a company like I don't know, Evertz? The answer is both. So they want the actual OEM vendor, Evertz, Trust, whatever, to pay yearly SDK access fees plus a fee for each one of their functional block that they will use in their application. And they want me or the integrator as the end user to pay a cost per microservice I run in the platform. And unfortunately, they were not able to announce any partners that did integrate during the show. So by the end of the show, they were more positioning themselves as complementary to NVIDIA and the other than as a direct competitor. So that was the Matrox Origin update. This one is really interesting. I'm curious, who heard about NVIDIA HoloScan for media before? Okay, so HoloScan for media is it's a framework that leverages a technology called HoloScan that was designed for another application, which is medical imaging, which is not even broadcast, but it shares a lot of the requirement, high quality, low latency. If you want to do remote surgery with 1 millisecond of latency, good luck. I don't want to be the patient. So, and if you want to do some CAT scan and look at the scan without high resolution, again, I don't want to be that patient. So there's a lot of common requirement between the two industries. So they decided to do a version specific for the media industry of that framework. It was available under specific, it was announced at IBC, available to specific partner through NDAs and pre-release version, but now it was formally launched at NAB this year. They released a server specification that an end user could buy that server and be sure that whoever builds application for HoloScan, it's going to work in their infrastructure. And that server specification, honestly, is not that different than some of the instances that you can get from AWS. So again, application wrote for HoloScan for media, they can work on-prem, they can work in the cloud, they work in both. So this is quite interesting because I believe they had the best demonstration at NAB this year. They had a cluster of 3 servers where they had, it's not a real production workflow, but basically they have a RED raw to ST2110 converter. So this is pretty much the same as a virtual CCU. You get raw data from the camera. In the demonstration, it was a 2K resolution at 480 frames per second. Then you convert that real time into 2110 P60, 5994. In software, in container, then you have Lavo that had a multi-viewer to create a mosaic of all the input. They had a bunch of alternate source, clip player, the color bar, or just an output of a display from a computer. Then Telestream, they had their Inspect 2110 software available to be used as a monitoring tool, a probe, to probe the signal. Beamer had an H265 encoder, so 2110 in, H265 out. Sony, they had their M2LX switcher, which is not as big as a hardware switcher, but it started to be in the quite big software-based switcher. Pebble Beach had a playout server channel running in software. And Comprimato, they had frame rate conversion. So I believe in terms of multi-vendor, that was one of the good, if not only demonstration, not using NDI at the show. However, they were still using SRT for some. And what it's not written there is that although HoloScan for media allows one application, let's say the RED virtual CCU, to share video data to the multi-viewer using shared memory, NVIDIA, they haven't specified yet what is the format of the data to be shared in memory. Is it YUV? Is it RGB? Is it pixels? Is it frames? Is it fields? It's not standardized. And until this gets standardized, well, you cannot really exchange data in memory. So that's why they were using 2110, although the whole concept is not to use 2110 and be asynchronous, the same as Matrox. The only exception is the Lavo multi-viewer. They were a container handling the inputs, container handling the outputs of the multi-viewer, and between the input and the output, it was shared memory. But it's easy to agree with yourself when it's you with you. So that's why the Lavo was able, and given how Lavo is structured as a company, that's a miracle that they agree with themselves to set up the input to output in a multi-viewer. So, yeah, again, Holoscan, they had a bunch of different demonstrations running on their platform, so that was quite interesting. And that whole thing happens with really low latency, but if they would have done shared memory, it would have been lower. That's all the... Do you remember at the beginning of 2110, Evertz had a proposal, not Matrox, but Sony had a proposal, Aspen, NMI, 2110. It was slide war, logo war. It's the same again. Company comes with their logo slide. However, the Holoscan for Media, in terms of who actually implemented some of it, it was way more than GV and a lot more than Matrox. The fourth one I learned at NAB, I wasn't aware of that before. It was quite interesting. It was Cisco, Intel, and Rust together. This is the combination of multiple projects, but one of it is called the Intel Media Transport Library. It's fully open source. It's already on GitHub. If you go on Intel GitHub today, you will have the whole code. They claim they can do 27 HD stream on a single core, on a single server, 2110 in and out, and be compliant with the narrow profile, which is quite amazing. It doesn't come with any license, and it doesn't require any specific network card. However, being a library by Intel, they test with Intel NIC, of course, and they don't test with the others. Combined with another project, which is called the Media Communication Mesh project, that allows container-to-container exchange of video content using shared memory. So basically, in that use case, the JPEG XS encoder shared data with the 2110 transmitter just by sharing memory. So this one was an interesting demonstration. And it shows that there's not only NVIDIA with Holoscan, but there's Cisco and Intel trying to work together to bring an alternative to that. I don't know if they will succeed because I don't say they're late to the party, but there's only one broadcast partner, but one is better than none. And I hope it's gonna get some traction, and it's gonna offer ways to do real production in software without too much latency. Other than that, there's two topics I want to talk, but both of them were already discussed. The first one is, Blackmagic and 2110, they really went all in with 2110 this year. And a few examples, they claim that they have the world first SDI rack mount monitor with 2110. And the good thing is it's Blackmagic prices. US dollar, but still. 1.3K for a 2110 monitor. This is cheaper than my Riedel, what we use at CBC. 2110 to HDMI converter, just the converter is more expensive than that. And then you get the whole screen. They also release a switch, and the switch is interesting. You have 16 10 gig copper interface, two 100 gig QSFP fiber interface, a built-in control system like built-in VSM or Magnum-ish, built-in NMOS registry, built-in monitoring. So basically, it's a network switch with an HDMI output. You put a computer monitor in the HDMI output, and you get beautiful dashboard of your network, everything that's happening on it. And if you don't want HDMI, you have a coax connector to do the exact same thing in SDI. You have a built-in control panel on the front, and it supports PTP for 2.9K. A typical Grass Valley Lavo Evertz control panel, just the panel is more expensive than that. The other great product, this is not a new product. It's a product that was existing. However, through a firmware update, you get 2110 for free if you already bought that camera in the past. And that camera, you have basically camera feed, return program, time code, gen lock, tally, talkback, control event, PoE, camera power, all through that single connection for 1.9K. This is impressive, knowing that Sony believe in 2024 it is still impossible to build a camera with 2110 support. So that's quite impressive. But Blackmagic, being what they are, there's always a small gotcha. So how do you get that small converter for $295? Well, you have to make compromise. Design is always about compromise, especially if you do value engineering. So those products, they don't have 2110, 2022-7 redundancy. There's no fiber interface. It's only copper. It's only 10 gigabits on the network, so you cannot do UHD P60. You can do UHD P30 or 1080 P60. But if you want to do UHD P60, you need to use compression. And compression, we have Tyco in that industry, but Tyco comes with licensing costs. And if you're a Blackmagic and you want to do it for $295, you cannot afford to pay in 2 picks a licensing cost. So basically, they invented their own algorithm that it's a lightweight compression that does 1.2 to 1 compression. And they say it's very tiny character, but they're planning to open source their codec so that other will be able to implement it. But I look for it and I was not able to find the detail. But still, if you can work with those limitations, you get a lot of value for very few dollars. And my last one, it was the Rust Artimo. I really believe it solves a lot of integration problem, especially for news application. But ask a code to your favorite Rust dealer, and you may go back to your traditional camera setup. It's beautiful, and it looks like a Tesla charger, so it comes at a Tesla price. It's not free. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, François.
So before everybody leaves, I want to give a round of applause to Applied and AWS for hosting.